Many artists find a style early on that suits them and then stick with that way of creating for the duration of their careers. There is a smaller group who, like Picasso, are continuously evolving, restless and temperamentally unwilling to remain on a single patch of aesthetic territory.
I'm Frank Galuszka. I was interested not in finding a niche within the existing art world, but of deciding what it was that art should be. Creating my own sense of what culture was. I was born in Newark, New Jersey. I was influenced by a number of things in childhood that evolved into my interest in multiple styles. Week after week in a church before I was 5 years old, there was a large Baroque painting of a saint that hung over the altar for most of the Mass. Then it was scrolled up, and underneath it was a Byzantine painting. And it occurred to me, without asking any adults about it because I knew they didn't know the answer, that these two things represented two equal and different realities. That stuck and is still in my head today. So it's a question for me more about reality than it's one about painting styles. There were a number of other experiences to do with proving to myself that what I was seeing, I was actually creating in my own eye or brain. Dali says, to see is to invent. I am a believer in that. In high school, my first class was with Ed Havis, who was unbelievably supportive and nurturing. It was not a studio class. It was just a discussion of art and art history. We went to New York City all the time, the Metropolitan Museum of Modern Art, all the galleries. Also in high school, I met a student named Joseph Spohr. Havis asked if anybody was interested in any contemporary art. I said I was interested in Dali. Spohr said he was interested in Jackson Pollock. Mr. Havis approved of Jackson Pollock, did not approve of Dali. So we argued about Dali for 4 years after that. I became friends with Joe Spohr. We worked together creating pieces of sculpture, works of art. He continued going from abstract expressionism into pop art and conceptual art. And at the same time, I was doing things in various styles, but gravitating more toward a kind of realism, although what I was interested in was the image, not the duplication of reality. I was not interested in working from life. I was interested in working from imagination. When I went to college at Syracuse, my most important teacher was Tetsuo Ochikubo, who was an abstract expressionist. At Syracuse, I met Peter Rudolph. Peter talks about the time that we taught each other to paint, and I think that's exactly what happened. The two of us transferred to Tyler together. We were having coffee at some place, and he said he'd heard of a psychiatrist in New York who only treated painters. I said, how does he decide who a painter is? Peter said, somebody who'd done 100 paintings. So we decided we were going to try to do 100 paintings. The third student got into this with us, Jeffrey Wasserman, who was a wonderful painter. Through the entire time, we talked about all the paintings we were doing, what they meant, what painting could be, working toward things in different styles. I was doing as many different kinds of paintings as possible. And then, of course, arguments about what was a painting and what wasn't a painting. So this was a realm of critique. The same was true of the Tyler educational idea at the time. It was not really instruction in the way of, say, the atelier movement is today. It was all talk and critique. That was it. My work developed through that.
At Tyler, Frank studied with Roger Anlaker, who worked with unsurpassed dedication in a variety of styles. Frank wrote, Roger Anliker emphasized the idea that there is no limit to quality. Frank moved to Santa Cruz in 1995 to become a professor at the University of California. He lives there with his partner, scholar Christina Waters. He shows his work at the Winfield Gallery in Carmel. Back when he was in Philadelphia, there was a place where his mysterious figurative paintings could be seen regularly.
My career, such as it is as an artist, came into being at the Moore Gallery in Philadelphia.
The gallery that Charles Moore ran for decades in Philadelphia was a mecca for art lovers. Chuck had an astonishingly good eye for art that was not only superbly crafted, but that was characterized by great emotional power. I have to say, it was my favorite art gallery in Philadelphia. Frank told me that his figure paintings are influenced by film and film stills. In an email he wrote, "It is important to note that there is no actual realism in my work. The drawings from life have an involuntary romantic inflection. Even my portraits aren't realistic. And about his process, Frank added, I make a little sketch of the painting from imagination. I have a model pose for a larger drawing. I grid this drawing onto the canvas in place. Then the model returns and the figure is finished with painting from life." Many of Frank's narrative paintings have what he calls a mythic quality, and sometimes have allusions to religious, philosophical, or mythological ideas. One series has been particularly important.
The La Vista Totale series that has the two women confronting one another. That series, though, runs through different styles. That series is the core axis ever since it first appeared in mid-1980s.
Frank's partner, Christina Waters, wrote in a 2013 essay, "This is not painting as object of our gaze. It is painting as world within which we gaze." I asked Frank to give me a one-sentence answer to the question, what do these two characters represent? He refused to bite, so I will tell you what I think. It's artist and bodhisattva, a seeker of wisdom, come to meet the one who understands the terrifying beauty of the world. Frank spent time in Europe as a Fulbright scholar in Romania in 1969. This was during the Cold War, and Frank saw firsthand how awful an authoritarian regime can be. He also spent time in Rome, studying for his MFA, which he received from Tyler in 1972. He met the painter Balthus and saw him at the time as, quote, the sole beacon of great figurative art through modernism. Frank loved that Balthus would paint the same subjects over and over again, but in different ways. I asked him about others who inspired him.
Edvard Munch, Dali, William Blake, Vermeer, Caravaggio, and Bonnard. Love Audouin Redon. I really love the whole symbolist movement. Symbolism prematurely evolved into surrealism. I think it could have expanded for a longer period of time, but the world situation, World War I, knocked it out. I wanted to create some kind of intermeshing of these interests and decided that I would position myself as an artist. I know this sounds very calculated. Somewhere in this vast territory between Caravaggio and Duchamp. That was a ridiculous place to be, but that's exactly what I decided, and that's where I still think I am today.
At one end of that great spectrum, Frank has created a series on the homeless that is a cross between expressionism and minimalism. He has also made a number of purely non-objective paintings.
A lot of them, I make no claims to them being original in any way, just like modernist paintings.
But one group in which he combines paint and collage seems quite original to me. He also created a series of blue paintings with text alluding to the issues of the day. On the more traditional end of Frank's aesthetic spectrum are his rapturously beautiful flower paintings. Sometimes they include figures or landscape elements. He wrote to me, "This started around 1980 as wedding gifts and turned into a body of work. Often there are several vases of flowers." He said that some of the horizontal compositions were inspired by a Renoir painting and that he wants to place a psychological space on the sides of the subject. I think I may have been introduced to Frank back when he lived in Philadelphia, but I regret I didn't get to know him. Through my iPhone, I've been able to connect with him and Christina in California. Frank sent me a flash drive with a ton of images of his work. I love all of his work, but the ones that really took my breath away are his landscapes. In a variety of styles and with supreme painterliness, Frank Galuszka has observed and captured California's desert and coast. They are among the most beautiful paintings I have seen in a very long time. He told me about his process.
A lot of the work that's done outdoors is done in the same place over and over and over again. I would go out every day and mostly do a painting each day. Not exactly the same Monet interest in the light of the day, but the feeling that each day had a different identity. And I was trying to make a painting that had to do with the identity of the day. The coastal landscapes are from California. The seasons change more slowly here, which is good for painting. What I did for a period of time was a body of work for each month. I would drive out to the same location at the beginning, and I would think of all the colors that were there. And then I would create a limited palette based upon that, and I would stay with that same palette through the month. Then as the colors of the landscape changed, I would move on to a different palette.
In 1997 and again in 2000, Frank and Christina visited Bellagio, an Italian town overlooking Lake Como and in view of the Swiss Alps. They went in the late fall, and in Frank's words, when the town was desolate, the streets were windswept and empty, and painting outdoors was tough and adventurous. Frank used the sketches and studies he did on location to make large studio paintings later. They are truly images of the sublime. Some artists who create varied bodies of work do so in self-contained chronological periods. Not Frank.
I revisit things all the time. I work in different ways, even at the same time, the same day, in the same room. If I'm working in this studio, I'm doing different work than I do if I'm working at home. If I work outdoors, I'm doing different work, and the style is different. And even if I'm in the studio, I find that I'm always doing a certain kind of painting on one wall and another kind of painting on another wall.
Through all his varied subjects, ideas, techniques, and styles, Frank seems to have an abiding love for the beauty of the world. Years ago, in a moment of crisis, he asked himself a question.
Am I going to be some very clever conceptual artist, or am I going to paint the things that I really love to paint? And at the time I was reading Carlos Castaneda books, and Don Juan said to Carlos, "You should follow the path with the heart." And that's what I decided. My paintings are about loving the world.